particular, the distinction in those in the association of Imam W.D. Muhammad is that is an acceptance and a recognition of the deep human harm and hurt that has been done to this people simply by the nature of the world as it was at the time that slavery was what it was. At the time when slavery was the order of the day. And the unfortunate distinction that America has is that it had perpetuated the worst form of slavery that ever existed among human beings in history, as said by the Encyclopedia Britannica. So we are the product of that situation, okay? And Imam Muhammad, in his helping us to move out of and away from the remedy that had been prescribed by his father's teacher, whose name is Farad Muhammad, and who also was once a resident imam here. Something special going on. And so the imam, he said the life of African Americans is like a group of people who have been subject to an experimental clinic designed to cause them to dysfunction in the vital areas of their lives. See, what happened in slavery was not purely an economic accident of sorts. Well, you know, this was the labor that was available, and so therefore we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Okay, slavery's over. Okay, that's that. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go on. No, there were a conscious effort to dehumanize a group of people, diminishing them to a place where they could only function as servants to the existing order. That was what, and that has been the work of many of the what you may know as the leaders of the various movements that have come up in the lives of blacks. You know, you go back to Frederick Douglass and W.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey, and you know, any of those that came in with Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, you know, all these other people, John Brown, that have come through. All these people were trying to get these people back to being human beings after this terrible, terrible, terrible trauma of slavery. Well, Farad Muhammad, who himself was not an African American nor European, he was basically Pakistani and Fijian. He's most known in Fiji, but basically Pakistani. And he started that movement, the Nation of Islam. And that Nation of Islam movement was predicated upon a mythical prescription, a strategy that came out of the science of culture and the science of human psychology. And he mixed and he measured and he designed and he defined and he structured and he borrowed from the various other black movements that were existing in the early 30s, and he put together what was called the Nation of Islam. Right. And you know, fast forwarding the clock, you know, you get a Malcolm X out of that, who stands as an icon of the kind of transformation that ideology, at least in part, can bring about in the life of an individual. Wallace D. Muhammad came out of that movement, and indeed he came from the loin of Clara Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad, the choice as the primary student of Farad Muhammad, and he was the one who quote unquote took over the Nation of Islam by designation of Farad Muhammad, and he kept that Nation of Islam in existence until 1975, that is upon his passing. Products came, of course, his own children, Elijah Muhammad and Clara Muhammad's own children, but then also out of that was a Wallace D. Muhammad, who, when he was about 12 or 13 years old, left alone on a rare occasion by his parents one night, and he heard the creaking in the house, and he was, you know, beginning to be afraid about the situation that he was in, and he at that moment prayed to God. He said, "Oh God, if I'm not seeing you correctly, bless me to see you correctly." And from that time on, he began to deny and question the ideas that had been fed to him from the womb, had been fed the community from the womb. that God is a man and that the black man is God and the white man is the devil, and white people came from some experiment. And he questioned and questioned and questioned and said, this man is not God. And that was when he came to odds with his father. This was before the change. But in the I have to say it, in the mythology or the doxology of the Nation of Islam at that time, it was always said that Wallace is going to be a very special help to his father, but nobody was ever told as to how this help is going to be brought about. What kind of help is he going to? The assumption was that he would simply take over the helm as the father had laid it out, but as time went on, he became so at odds with the language and the doctrine of that time, is that ultimately he was excommunicated from his father's house and from his father's community, because he, like Abraham in the Quran, was rejecting the idols that were being presented by Abraham, his father, and Farad Muhammad being presented by Elijah Muhammad as God in the person. Well, make a connection between Malcolm and Wallace D. Muhammad to appreciate the foresightedness of Elijah Muhammad, of Imam Muhammad. When Malcolm, as was mentioned by Ni'mat, that when Malcolm made Hajj, it was mentioned by Zakir. When Malcolm made Hajj, he saw the beauty and the grandeur and the brotherhood and the unity and the falsity of the description of the white people as devils and the like. And he wrote letters to different people back in America. And in one letter, and it's mentioned in his autobiography, in one letter he wrote back to a correspondent, and he said, I now agree with Wallace D. Muhammad that the only salvation for the Nation of Islam is for them to come to the mainstream orthodoxy of Islam. So Imam Wallace D. Muhammad had already informed Malcolm and encouraged him that the way that we're following in the Nation of Islam is not the way that Islam actually dictates. Well, as time went on, coming into the early 70s, Elijah Muhammad actually had been chronically ill for the last 14 years of his life, actually. But the way that he was managing the Nation of Islam at that time, it was not really a broadly known fact. Nevertheless, in 72, around 72, 73, well, Wallace he comes back into the community. He had been excommunicated. He hadn't changed any of his beliefs. He hadn't, changed any of his rejection of those ideas. But his father, knowing that Farad Muhammad had a special mission for him, and then his also being aware of the uniqueness of his son Wallace, he came back, and Elijah Muhammad began to send him around in the Nation of Islam in the early 70s to begin to recondition the mindset and prepare the mind for what is coming. And Elijah Muhammad did the same thing. In fact, they tried to indict Imam Muhammad in those early days of his return because they were hearing him do radio interviews. And on one occasion, they recorded one of his radio interviews, knowing that his talk was not in line with the kind of talk that they gave in what was called the temples at that time. And so during one of the monthly meetings with Elijah Muhammad, which was mandatory for the national leadership, they brought the tape, and Wallace was back at the table, and they said they wanted to play the tape, hoping that Elijah Muhammad would, at that point in time, simply and finally excommunicate Wallace again. So they wanted to play the tape, hoping that would be the final nail in his coffin, if there were a coffin. So they played the tape. Elijah Muhammad is there. Clara Muhammad was there as well. She passed shortly thereafter. And as they played the tape, Elijah Muhammad, who had been ill, as we said, on hearing what Wallace was saying, the kind of doctrine and the direction that he was going in his knowledge, he said, Elijah Muhammad stood up. He turned to his wife, Clara, the mother of this boy, who I didn't mention, but I would say they would put his name, they wrote his name, Wallace D. Muhammad, on the door in the household. And the children were told to trace over that name. This was a ritual that they were given to trace over that name. This was before he was born, because he's going to have a special role. But nobody knew what that role was, because Farad Muhammad never told him what the role was, but they just knew he fiber and the fabric of the community, that Wallace is something special. And so now here comes Wallace rejecting the ideas that they had been given for, nigh on 40 years at this time. How can this guy be special? In any case, they played the tape. Elijah Muhammad, even in his illness, he stood up, he turns to his wife, he said, "Clara, isn't this what we've been looking for?" And she said, "Yes." He said she was a dark woman with pearly white teeth. And when she smiled, it's like the sun shining at night. And she was so enthused by it. Though they didn't know, intuitively in their hearts, they recognized, this is where we're going. They said, that boy's got it. He can go anywhere in this country and preach that gospel. This is what Elijah Muhammad said. And then from that point in time, Imam W.D. Muhammad, who is known as chief minister and different things, he has been moving us in transition, preserving as many as could be preserved from all of the traumas and all of the changes and all of the mythology and all the incorrect doctrine, to bring us to what Islam really is. To bring us to what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant when he said, none of you will enter paradise until he believes. And none of you will be a believer until you're motivated by love. This is what Prophet Muhammad said. And it's a long way from believing that the black man is God and white people were made from an experiment on the island of Panama, Petmos, over 600 years, to coming to a Focolare Movement. But that is the work of Imam W.D. Muhammad. And the beauty that he sees in Kiara, and that we are now able to see, not just today, since this relationship has been formed between them, it's so wonderful. Like he said, you gave me in the tape, is that you've given me more tools. Because he said he finds in his encounter with other people, things coming to mind from his encounters with you, so you help it. And you do the same for us. When we're with people who, like you, who really love God, and who really want to serve God, and who really want to exemplify, who want to live out the scripture that they say that they believe in, and follow the model that they have been given in your case, Jesus Christ, peace be on him. And we don't, the encounter doesn't call for a need to posture in position and, look like and fake like. We're talking believer to believer. Then we can look at you and in mirror we say, oh, that's what love really looks like. Oh, that's what following a leader really looks like. That's what obeying scripture really looks like. Oh, yeah, we can do the same thing because the Quran says, because the Hadith. Kiara gave a khutbah. There's a khutbah. The Muslims know. And when she was citing the Quran, she was on it. Like she said, that's what we said. So you take a little bit of that African American Bible stuff with you. Yeah, we were in these shows and they said that Kiara was on it. Yeah, well, she was. And you can see, even as she sat there, as she spoke, you think about her as a young girl, I know she was fiery. Because as she moved, just the movement of her hands and the stretching of her points and the emphasis that she made, I knew that when that hair was black and when she was young and strapping, she was all over the place. We want to say to all of us that we want to definitely keep her in our prayers. She's 86 years old. She's been in Switzerland for the past year and a half. Very difficult, illness. No illness is easy. But we're hoping for her recuperation at least, and perhaps for a very special invitation that she has from the present Pope to give a special presentation on behalf of all of the various, or I'll have to say organizations within the Catholic movement. And she has been invited to speak on behalf of all of them to the Holy Father, the Pope. Pope Benedict? Pope Benedict, yes. So our prayers are for that to happen. So I conclude, and actually, conclusion, we're actually going to have a closing together. As I said, the Imam really talks about his experience with that Muslims who encounter real Christians, and real Christians who encounter real Muslims. And yes, the opposite is also true. Yes, you have some false Christians who encounter false Muslims, and vice versa. But when real people of faith encounter each other, all of the veils fall. You no longer see a black person. You don't see a white person. You don't see an Asian person. I mean, your spirit doesn't see that. And when you talk and you appreciate it, and you pray that they would say more, and you hope that the exchange will continue, because the interweaving of our spirits, our hearts, and our minds, and our sharing of faith and our relationships with God, it's just so special. It's like being at a well of fresh, deep spring water. And you know that as you travel on, that well is going to be behind you. And you don't know if you're ever going to get back to that well, or you don't know when the next one is coming. So you just want to drink so deeply from that. And the real Muslim wants that experience to be constant. We want to live on that level. We want to be really spiritual people. And in the light of all the things that we said in the past, I say to the Muslims who are here, please understand, Imam Muhammad wants us to go on and on and on to the kind of real, authentic spirituality that Islam offers to us. And by the grace of God, we in the Focolare Movement have been brought together for that purpose, so that we can cross-fertilize each other, so that we can interact with each other, so that we can enrich and so that we can reinforce our lives together, so much so that we'll no longer see each other as separate, but we see each other as one. Human beings in service to God under the blessed leadership that He's given us. So this time I'd like to ask Antonio to come and join us here. We're simply going to close. I'll close with a short prayer, recitation of a short chapter of the Quran. And I would ask Antonio afterwards if you can close in the manner that's considered. If you would simply bow your heads. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
It's really hard not to follow that. I'm going to talk, I'm not going to dance, I'm not going to play the drums. First of all, let me say it's really wonderful to be here. Not only this time, I was telling the Imam as we were on the line to get the food that I have to say personally, every encounter, every gathering, even every encounter with any one of you every time has been an experience of faith to me. It has helped me in my faith, my life of faith. It has strengthened my faith. So I can say the same of this evening, so I thank you for that. It's an occasion to get together, to share a meal, and also to get to know one another. So we thought as part of the program we would include a brief presentation in which we share with you a little bit of what we do, who we are, and then you do the same with us, so that we don't have a chance only to meet the people at the same table, but to know more about your life faith here and our experience in the Focolare. So very briefly, I'd like to share with you a few ideas on this topic. To share something about the Focolare, it's interesting, we think that a good way to do this is to tell you something about its origins, how it started. That's always significant, but I think it's very important in our experience because it explains how this organization, if you wish, started, but also how it starts in our personal life. And I can say that's true for me as well. So in my life of faith, in a certain way, I repeat the experience of the origins of the Focolare. So that's why we want to share this with you. Some of you are familiar with it, but maybe for those who are not so familiar with it, I'd like to share a couple of things. So it started in 1943, right, in northern Italy, in the city of Trent. 1943 was a time of war in Europe, as you know, the Second World War. And it was quite violent in the northern part of Italy, the city of Trent. There, a group of young girls in their late teens and early 20s, among them Chiara Lubich, whom you saw in the video a few years later. They lived there, and they had, I think God blessed them with a certain experience. If you want, very, very simple, but I think very profound at the same way, because they were young people, and all of a sudden, because of the violence of the war, they realized that many of the things they were doing, many of the goals they had in life, this violence was taking them away from them. This violence took away the possibility for one of them to continue her studies at the university, because they closed down the university because of the war. The fiancé of one of them died in the front. Many houses were destroyed. So all of a sudden, because of these circumstances, they found themselves, I think, in front of this cruelty, of violence, of war, of destruction. And then they thought, well, but this is taking away everything from us, everything we were hoping to have in our life. It's all gone. So they said, well, is there anything? Is there anything that this war cannot take away from us? Because we would like to live for that. And then there was the grace of God, because they realized that yes, there was not something, but someone for whom they could live, and that no bomb, no war, no violence could destroy, could take away from them. And they realized that they wanted to live for God. It's really the blessing of God on them. But not only that, it's very interesting, because again, here we go back to that time of, again, destruction. It's important to see it in this context. Because not only they realized that that God existed, but the God they discovered, or they rediscovered, they discovered a God who was all powerful, yes, but who was all merciful, who was love in the midst of the war. Okay. And that's a discovery they made many years ago. That's what I'm saying, that in a sense, the life of faith, and I know that's the case certainly personally for me, it starts always with that discovery, or rediscovery. A couple of quotes were from Chiara, where she herself tells us about this. Therefore, this spirituality, we say, asks us to open our hearts to God, who is a Father, who does not abandon His children to their own designs, but who desires to accompany them, protect them, and help them. Because He reads the heart of each person, He cares for each one of us personally. He counts even the hairs of our head, as Jesus said. He never burdens us with more than we can bear, but He carries our burdens Himself. To believe then in God's love, to be sure of it in every circumstance of life, is what this new spirituality requires of those who want to follow it. And we have believed in God. And this is a very interesting thing, because again, in the time of war, they were afraid they could die at any time, any day. So one day they were talking and said, well, if we were to die today because of this bombardment, and they said, well, we would like to be buried in one common tomb and to have written on top, and we have believed in God's love, in the love of God. To believe that we are personally and immensely loved by God. To believe in His love and to give Him the first place in our heart. This is it. Okay? This is the discovery they made again years ago, and really the first spark that initiated what then became an organization, what then became a movement. Very briefly then of course, after discovering this God who is love for them, then they said, well, then we got to do something about it. So we want to respond to His love with our love. So doing God's will, loving our brothers and sisters, etc., etc. They rediscovered many truths of their faith. But then there's just one more instance I would like to share with you of this history, because again it's significant for what we do here this evening. One day, during one of the bombardments, they had to seek refuge in a shelter, which is more, I've seen it's more like a cave, something in a rock. It's a very simple shelter, and they were there. So again, the noise, right, the violence, the dust, dark inside. They had a candle, and they had brought with them the Holy Scriptures, the Christian Scriptures with them. They opened it in the page of the Gospel of John, where towards the end of Jesus' life, he's praying to the Father, God the Father, and then part of his prayer is when he says, Father, that all may be one. So he prayed for the unity of human race, for universal brotherhood. And these young girls, teenagers, again, God's grace, they realized, reading this page, that this was their mission statement. That whatever God was started was somehow summarized there in that one sentence. So many things have developed since then. Again, the whole organization grew up. Spreading in different countries, right? And certainly became not only within the Catholic Church, but as they were saying, with this interfaith intrinsic aspect to our lifestyle in many countries, different cultures. So it would be a long story. I'm not going to do all of that right now. I think what I would like to say, well, a couple of things. That in this whole history, in the part that concerns the history of the Focolare in the US, a very significant moment, and I mean this also personally for me, was the encounter of Therapeutic with Imam W. Muhammad. So I cannot skip that in describing and summarizing our history, and this for many different reasons. Then the second thing is that, well, in telling you this story of going back again to the origins, to this discovery of God, merciful God the Father, for me it's always not only interesting, it's a bit more than that. I always like saying this because, first of all, I want to remind myself of it before I dare to share it with you. Because again, more and more I realize that it's at the very core of my life of faith, of our life of faith. So this evening, together with you, I would like to recommit myself to this faith in this one God, Father of us all, who is love and merciful.
So touched with the things that we're sharing with each other. That was my moment of silence. Now I'd like to bring up the songs by the Focolare Band.
We would like to sing for you a couple of songs. As you know, our musicality is really a fruit of the experiences. In fact, all of the songs are fruits of the experiences of all of us whenever we're together. We feel that God is really present among us. And for this, we feel this joy that's overwhelming, which leads us to compose many of these songs. The songs that you will hear have been gifts for us, and we'd like it to be a gift also for you, fruits of our experiences. You can sing with us. You have the song sheets. We'll be singing Celebration first.
We're going to see Wayne love one more time.
El Wadu, Allah is the Nabi.